Hello, everyone. It's Dr. Joseph Capps coming back to you again with another episode of Dancing with the Darkness. It's our real and raw account of CPTSD, living with that, all of the nasty little things that come with that, but also it is a podcast about hope, about how we can take the upper hand against these things, the things that have basically run our lives in a lot of ways, and to show that you can not only survive with this, but you can thrive if you do the work and you realize that you're someone that needs a little bit more than just yourself to get through this. You start to realize that there's a higher power involved, that there's something bigger than the CPTSD, and that you can do this. You can absolutely have a better life and a more enriching life, and actually even get to the point where you're able to help others, which is the stage that I'm at in my life, and it's a beautiful thing to be able to mitigate or lessen any discomfort or pain that individuals are going through. And if I can do that with my experiences and what I've had to deal with in my life, it gives the ultimate sense of validation and edification to be able to put that into practice to help others. It's a beautiful blessing. And so today, what we're going to talk about, we've been doing some videos about all of the little things that happen with emotional flashbacks, and that's kind of a staple with CPTSD. It is a big part of what we deal with, and we went over a lot of little elements that go on with that, but we also talked about some coping strategies to deal with those that you could put in your toolbox. So we absolutely cannot talk about CPTSD without talking about attachment and unhealthy attachment. And so before we launch into a series specifically on attachment and what it looks like with CPTSD, before we get started today, as a matter of fact, if you're watching this video for the first time, or if you are a subscriber, please like and share this video to your feed so that we can just try to reach more people. That's all we're trying to do, is to reach people out there that are hurting. So that helps us a lot. And if you like what you see, then please subscribe to the channel, because we're trying to do a video weekly, and that way you can keep up with us. If you would rather listen to the podcast instead of watch it on YouTube, we are on Podbean and we are on Spotify. So please check us out. Like I said, we're just trying to get the word out to help other people that are dealing with CPTSD. And so what I want to talk about today, before we launch an actual series on attachment, the first thing I'm going to say is that we have developed, or I have developed with CAPS Christian Counseling, a protocol, the Trauma Discovery Protocol, which is basically a complex trauma profiling system. And unlike anything in the world, unlike anything that anyone is doing, one of the elements that we specifically look at in regard to CPTSD is attachment, and how huge of a part that plays in the life of somebody with CPTSD. There's a lot of attachment therapists out there. There's a lot of people doing somatic attachment work, but it is generalized. And part of the profile that we do that, I believe was not just man-led, but God-led for me to create, is that we are looking at the total package, and we're looking at how attachment integrates with other parts of who you are, such as temperament, personality, love languages, the list goes on. And so what I want to talk about today, before we go into attachments, I want to talk about, what does a marriage or an intimate relationship look like with somebody with CPTSD, okay? And I'm going to tell you from personal experience, this is something that I intimately understand in my own intimate relationships, and also from the view of the partners of those that have to be in a relationship with a person like me with CPTSD. It can be very difficult as we're trying to navigate who we are as the stages of life continue, as we change physically, mentally, and spiritually. It changes and evolves as well. It is definitely a layer, a layered onion or whatever we want to call it. It is a tremendous amount of stuff. I think of there's a restaurant called Outback. I'm sure you've heard of it, where you get this blooming onion, and this thing just goes. It's like an onion that just threw up, right? And there's all these little arms hanging off of it, and CPTSD is like that. And so we've talked about the emotional flashbacks, which are a huge component of what happens in our intimate relationships, because generally, even with CPTSD, or PTSD in general, we have a huge unsuccess rate with intimate relationships and marriages. The rate of divorce is pushing 80%. For individuals that deal with CPTSD and PTSD. And it's because it's so complex and it has so many issues and so many layers, and they change, that the spouses normally either can't keep up, or they get into a hopelessness because they just don't know what to do. And so I want to talk about some things that you may recognize in your marriage or in your intimate relationship, okay? And these are signs of a very insecure marriage or relationship. And this goes hand in hand with CPTSD. And the reason I'm starting off with this video is because I want you to get a feel or a thermometer measurement of your marriage or your intimate relationship and what that looks like. So some of these things probably are going to jump right out at you. Some of them may even trigger you. That's not what I'm trying to do with this video, but I do need us to understand what it looks like, okay, so that we can start picking it apart with further videos. We can start looking at what attachment is, why we do these things in our relationships. Then we can start working on ways to not do those things. We can start working on ways to make our attachments healthier. We even can get to a point where we have what's called a secure attachment, which is a hard place to get to, but we can do it. And this is where you are in a relationship with someone and you're able to put aside the fears of abandonment. You're able to put aside the effects of not being nurtured or being in an abusive childhood or in abusive relationships. You're able to even get to a point where you're able to be vulnerable and to allow this person to be part of your trauma and part of the solution of your healing. Okay, so this can happen, but it takes a tremendous amount of effort. And unfortunately, with the divorce rates that we see, this often doesn't happen until individuals start their healing journey, and most of the time, unfortunately, it ends up being with someone else, either maybe a second marriage or a different relationship. So it's not something that I like talking about, because it's really not what God wants or anything else. He doesn't want these relationships to not survive, but it's the cold, hard truth. And we need to understand that God is a redeemer. God forgives, and he also understands sickness and illness. And CPTSD and PTSD, they're not disorders, they're wounds, they're illnesses that we have to heal from. Okay, and God understands that better than anyone. When he created us in his image before sin was in the world. And so that's what we need to remember, that sin was the beginning of trauma and pain and CPTSD and PTSD. And our bodies and our minds were never created to deal with that. Okay, so God understands that, and God does not stand in judgment of individuals that are ill. Okay, and so that's why I share my faith on these videos, because it is a huge part of my own recovery. It is a huge part of who I am and how I teach other people and how I care about people. And it is at the forefront of any therapy that I do with individuals, because just knowing that God is there and he is bigger than our trauma and that we don't have to do this on our own is a huge step to healing. And so I'm telling you these things because if you're in a relationship that looks like this, I don't want you to think that it's necessarily hopeless. For some of us, it may be, right? It may be because we've gone too far. into the dark. We've gone too far into the pain. We've gone too far into the wounds. And for whatever reason, it's not restorable. Okay? If you're there, I understand. It's not the end of the world. Okay? Also, if you're in a relationship and you see some of these things and you see that they're red flags and you know that they're causing issues, I want you to know that they can be dealt with and you can experience healing, and so can your partner. Okay? It's going to take two people that are willing to do the work. It's going to take two people that are willing to literally walk through the fire, but it can be done. Okay? And I believe that God has a person that He's already crafted for every single one of us that has the fortitude and the strength and the love and the empathy to walk beside us through this journey and to help us with restoration and redemption. So I want to come at this in a positive, not a negative way. So insecurity, if we look at marriages and we look at unhealthy marriages, if you think of a candy cane or a barber pole or whatever, the white and the red are kind of spiraled together. What we see is we see that insecurity and pride are kind of like that intertwined. They're just kind of stuck together. And so we know that pride is sin. It's the original sin. It's what started this whole party, right? Was pride, was the devil getting thrown out of heaven because he thought that he was better than us and better than God. So we know that there's sin involved there, and we know that pride causes a lot of issues. So when you mix that with an insecurity that is a huge part of these relationships because of CPTSD, I mean, we are insecure, and we have reason to be because our caregivers, multiple partners, whatever, we have been betrayed, we have been wounded, and we have been conditioned and have grown into an adult in that scenario where we cannot count on people and people are going to hurt us. And even when we get into a relationship and this person claims to love us and everything else, there's always an insecurity there and always a fear because we've been conditioned. We've been conditioned that eventually this person is going to get tired of our crap and walk away, or they're going to cheat on us, or they're going to hurt us in some way. We are predisposed to that. And when we start talking about attachment and unhealthy attachments, we'll be talking about what that insecurity looks like, and what that's called. But we're not going to go over that in this video. I just want to set a foundation for everyone by examining some things that I have experienced myself in an insecure marriage or an insecure relationship. And I know that these are common amongst many of us with CPTSD. Okay, so one of the things that we need to look at when we start talking about that insecurity in a marriage is that a lot of times we find ourselves trying to impress our spouse, which we shouldn't have to do, instead of being vulnerable and letting them see that inner child that's inside that's afraid. Instead of being vulnerable enough to share the struggles we're going through or whatever, we find ourselves in this place of sometimes even false bravado. We go overboard to try to protect that inner child or to not be vulnerable. We actually regularly will try to impress our spouse, or we will try to do things. I am a classic overachiever. Whether it doesn't matter what I did in life. If I was going to be a fisherman, I had to get as many possible citations as possible. When I did martial arts, I had to go as high as I could in martial arts. Working out and lifting weights, I had to be as intense as I possibly could. It doesn't matter. Anything that I've done, whether it be education, career, any of these things, I've always been trying to go one more rung on the ladder. And that's because we are brought up in a way where we feel inferior. We feel like we can never do anything right. We can never do anything good enough. The bar is always raised, and we can never do anything good enough to get the love and affirmation and care from our caregivers. And so that's how we get conditioned. So we go into this relationship and we mean well, and we are loving this individual the very best we can, but the truth that we need to come to is that we need to understand that we really do not know what love is supposed to look like. The only way to really define what love looks like is we have to go to our God and to our Lord, and we have to look at His example of love for us to really understand what love is supposed to be. So we go into this doing the very best we can, and a lot of what we do is we feel like we have to impress our spouse or impress our partner, and so we have to be the best, right? And the reason why, it's very primal in nature too. Even when you look at animals, you know, the toughest lion or the alpha wolf or whoever, they're the ones who get to mate, right? And then adversely, the female is attracted to the prettiest peacock or the biggest rooster or whatever. Okay, and so we do have a primal part of us in relationships that makes us feel like we have to impress our spouse as well. And this causes a lot of issues because we become regularly very self-conscious, and the more we're self-conscious, the more it affects the people around us. We don't realize it, but us not being confident in ourselves can actually push outward, and it can actually cause our spouses or those around us to lose confidence in us because we don't have confidence in ourselves. One of the next thing that we see so often is that we are literally starving. We are starving for our spouses or our significant others' approval or gratitude or appreciation. So, you know, the protocol is so important that I talked about because we look at these things deeper. We look at what your love languages are, for instance, because if your love language is acts of service and your spouse's love language is not acts of service, you're kind of running on a treadmill and you're not getting anywhere, okay? And so we go overboard with the acts of service, trying to serve our spouse and do things for our spouse, and we do not get the approval or the appreciation or the affirmation that we're seeking. Now, here's where it gets even trickier, is that with CPTSD, which we talked about in previous videos, sometimes we don't even know how to take the approval when we do get it, okay? So it gets very, very tricky here. And it becomes a matter of cognitive emotive dissonance, or that gut feeling of discomfort when we do finally get that, because then we start to disbelieve, right? We start thinking that it may not even be legitimate. Like, is this person giving me this because they think I need it, instead of it being genuine? So this gets really, really nasty, and you find yourself, you know, maybe for a couple decades, this is okay and you can navigate it and you figure it out, but then you get older and you you start looking back at life and you start looking at what future you have left, and sometimes this is too much, you know, for your spouse or your significant other. They're like, you know what, I'm tired of this, because they feel like they have to prove themselves to you every single day, and that can cause detriment. It really, really can. And so we need to be conscious of that. We end up feeling almost isolated or resentful when we finally get whatever approval or that we need, because we start thinking about, well, wow, you know, look at what I had to do to get that, right? I had to go, you know, 10 out of 10, I had to go 15 out of 10, right, to get what I'm seeking. And we also go over that in the protocol. We talk about expressed versus wanted behaviors, okay? So we get into that too, because this has a lot to do with that as well. We do not express what we actually want, and then we have an unreasonable expectation for that other person to give it to us, okay? So this, you know, sometimes you may feel that you're literally having to turn cartwheels or do somersaults in front of your spouse or your significant other to get what you need. Not a good thing. You may feel like you're a bird hitting a piece of glass, okay? These are things that we see in insecure marriages, and it's on both sides. It's not just with the person with CPTSD. You know, we've talked about this in the past as well. A lot of times we end up with people that have narcissistic qualities, or they have covert narcissistic qualities, and so it's just a really bad chemistry experiment, because they're not even capable of giving us what we need, and then at the same time we don't even know what we need, so it can be a big problem. Another thing that shows insecurity in marriage is when you talk to other people, more so about your marital issues instead of your spouse. You get to a point where you feel like you're beating a dead horse talking to your spouse, like you're not getting anywhere. And so we end up seeing a lot of issues in insecure relationships where you start talking to someone else, whether it be same sex or different sex. And, this obviously can lead to issues. It's going to lead to distance between you and your spouse, even more so than what you had. And sometimes we can get closer to someone else that is not part of our marriage or our relationship. So we know where that ends up going. Your eyes have wandered a little bit lately, right? This is a sign of an insecure marriage too. Your eyes tend to wander a little bit, and it's not necessarily, we put so much connotation on lust or sex because that's what society thinks it about. But a lot of times it's not us putting eyes on another person physically. It's us putting eyes on someone that maybe they treat us a different way. Maybe they make us feel a different way. Even if it's at the friendship level, these individuals say the right thing or do the right thing, and it can become something that we are addicted to. It really, really can, because you're so desperate to be treated that way. It can even be sometimes I've seen where it's not even about the other individual. It's literally about how you feel when you're around that other individual. So you're not necessarily attracted to the person, but you're actually attracted to how they make you feel, the feelings that you get around them. And this can be tricky to navigate too, because feelings can get all kinds of jacked up for a lot of individuals. So we have to be very conscious of that. One of the things that I've experienced is that, my significant other has told me that I can't get close to them because I feel like I'm walking through a minefield when I'm around them. And honestly, I have to say that is truth. I've been in denial. I've tried to deny it, but we develop a fear based on the insecurity, and we feel like we can't even be around the other person because they're going to hurt us. They're going to say something that's going to hurt us. They're going to remind us of our own behavior that we don't want to hear about. Something's going to happen. And so it really is getting to a point where you're walking through a minefield. It really is a good connotation to use for that. We see ourselves holding back from what we're really thinking about because we're afraid that that's going to cause issues or cause turmoil or cause negative energy or an argument, and we just get to the point where we're so desperate to not have confrontation, and we're so desperate to just not have any more stress in our lives that we just placate, or we play along, or we even act the part. And it's not always because it might be hurtful. It's not always because it's unwise, and it's not always because it's poor timing. Those are all excuses that we use, but sometimes it is really a conditioned response. This is what these relationships look like, and so you can see why this deep hole gets dug in these relationships, and why we see a significant amount of divorce, because these are very huge, significant things that impact the health of a relationship, and not only that, they're very hard to recover from. Marriage counseling, unfortunately, is not done the way that it should be done. The way that you are trained to do marriage counseling, no matter what you do, man or woman, there is a desperation on the part of the husband and wife to have someone on their side, to have someone hear them, to someone advocate for them. And a lot of time the therapist gets caught up in that, and they end up consciously or subconsciously taking a side. If you're in marriage counseling or you're trying marriage counseling, you need to find a therapist that will make the marriage the client. The only way to not be bipartisan and to not buy into the either or is to set up boundaries as a therapist and realize that both parties are here to save the marriage, and that the marriage is the client. So you are there for the marriage, and you are there to save the marriage, and that is the only way. And this is why we see so many couples go to marriage counseling, and not only does it not help, it actually causes it to even be worse, because now this person feels like they're being ganged up on by not only their spouse but the therapist and the spouse. And we know what happens. There's just more and more distance that gets created. So we're actually compounding a problem. Things that happen, not only in the counseling room, but when you're in your everyday lives with this person. You can call it throwing darts. You can call it, a lot of men like to say that women are archaeologists because they dig up the past. Well, this happens a lot. We don't just go into the issue at hand. We begin to weaponize everything, okay? So it can be small jabs. It can be us refraining from being kind or refraining from giving affection because we know what that person wants. It's like you're subconsciously or consciously punishing the person that you're supposed to be loving and giving things to. We may think in our minds, in our unhealthy minds, that we're evening the playing field. You did this, so I've got to do that. So instead of showing the other person kindness and love, we're literally, weaponizing things that we can do to make us feel like we're not at a disadvantage. Okay, so it becomes competition. It becomes very unhealthy. Who can hurt the other person worse? Who has the advantage in this argument? Who has the advantage in this situation? And it's really, really so unhealthy. It's not what it's meant to be. We are meant to, biblically it says that we are meant to become one flesh. Okay, so we are meant to become a team. We are meant to become each other's missing piece. We are meant to be a unit together, and that is actually the life. It's not the individual people. This is what it's meant to be biblically, is that we are supposed to be, best friends and partners and teammates, and everything that we do in life we do together with each other's unique perspective. We do it with love and trust and empathy, and not many marriages have that, unfortunately, and it's because we are in a broken world. And I believe that one of the only ways you can have that in your marriage or in your relationship is that God has to be the center of it, because we have to be looking to something bigger than ourselves, and we have to be looking at what He says and living by His principles. And by doing so, we have to ignore, or not necessarily ignore, but we have to give the other person grace if we're going to be able to do that, because that other person, based on whatever's going on with them, especially someone with CPTSD, they're going to be breaking these invisible rules and these invisible boundaries because of the hurt and the stuff that is coming on them from the outside. And like the last video, we talked about the inward and what is coming from the inward outward. So it's a tremendous task sometimes for the spouses of individuals that have this. We're going to go into, in later videos, the resounding qualities, though, that someone with CPTSD has. There's some qualities there that no one else in the world is going to have. There's always a silver lining to every cloud, okay? And a lot of times these are the things that first attract that other person to you. Your immense ability to have empathy and caring. With men, it's the ability to be masculine and tough, but at the same time to have endearing qualities and caring qualities and sensitivities. So these things can be very, very bright and shiny from the outside when you first see them, and then we evolve and we grow and we age, and these things become more of a pain in the butt sometimes, okay? One of the things that you do in an insecure marriage with CPTSD, another thing that we do is a lot of times we will literally hold out to ask forgiveness, right? We want, I'm not saying sorry until they say sorry, okay? And this becomes a war of attrition between the two of you, and just causes more issues. Now we have even more distance, because the longer we wait to ask for forgiveness, the longer we are building resentment, the longer we are pushing apart, okay? And then when somebody finally gives in and they apologize, a lot of times it's not seen as genuine. And so we're not even really getting the product of what we're trying to achieve with that. We're trying to possibly deflate the confrontation. Maybe we're trying to fix the situation. Maybe we're trying to move on and move forward. And now, because we've done this silly, immature, and insecure thing of waiting to be the one who says sorry, we've negated any positives that could come out of that. This is just a common thing, you know. Like I said, if this video is speaking to you, if this is something that you're seeing in your relationships, I totally understand. It's very, very hard and it hurts. We always want to prove we're right. I've talked about this in the workplace before. When it comes to integrity, a lot of people that have integrity, when someone questions that integrity, it's a big deal to them. It's a game changer, right? It's one of those things that'll make you quit your job if you're a person with integrity, because it's like, man, I'm doing everything right. I'm honest. I'm doing what I'm supposed to do. And anyone who feels like they have to prove every single day that they're not a liar, this gets old. It's defamating and it's demoralizing and it's hard. And so when we are in these insecure marriages and relationships based on our trauma, we see this a lot where we constantly feel like we have to be the one who's right. There's just no give. And this kind of goes hand in hand with that lack of ability to say you're sorry and to ask forgiveness and to humble yourself. The other thing that we see a lot is we can become hyper-focused on our spouse's faults. This is for a lot of reasons. It's not just, we want to see it as a malicious thing, and we want to see that, a lot of people say that, their spouse or the person they're with has become their enemy. And, this is how this happens, is that we start to be hyper-focused on their faults instead of being hyper-focused on the reason why we love them in the first place or fell in love with them in the first place. And this can create some serious issues if we look at these faults. God doesn't look at our faults. He looks at us for who we truly are. He looks at who he crafted and who he designed. And so we need to learn to do that as well. And it's difficult. We need to not hyper-focus, especially on things that really aren't significant. There's a lot of things that we tend to hyper-focus on in these insecure marriages. And we need to understand from a CPTSD point of view that we're doing this out of self-preservation. We're doing this to protect ourselves. We're doing this so that we have the ability to build walls, okay? If we can find things wrong with the other person, it gives us the ability to lessen our emotional attachment to that person. And so that is a self-preservation thing that we do. And the reason why is because subconsciously, because of the abuse, because of what's happened to us, we literally have a fear of abandonment that never goes away. And so we are trying to put ourselves in a strategic position to where if this person does abandon us or does something to hurt us, we feel like we are strong enough to survive that, right? We're strong enough to move on and to survive the pain that's going to come with that. We are afraid to become completely vulnerable and completely surrender to this person because we know that somewhere in our mind, we know that they have the power to literally destroy us, right? We don't think that we will survive this person doing that to us, okay? And that's not true. Because we need to understand that God is with us and he will give us the strength. He truly can be the only thing that can fill our void many times. And we need to realize that. But, we hold back. We do all of these insecure things. And it's all because we were conditioned to do so. Because as a child, we had to learn how to survive and how to navigate the circumstances we are in. And so it can become very, very difficult, not only for us, but for our spouse. And you need to understand that this doesn't just happen in the first 5 years of marriage or the first 10. We need to realize that at 20 years, 25 years, 30 years, or beyond, these things can still manifest to a point where it can end marriages. So we can never be complacent. We can never be comfortable. in these relationships, we need to understand that we have to remain vigilant, and we have to remain in a place where we continue to put effort into these relationships, or it cannot be survivable sometimes. And it's very sad, but it's true. And so I'm not trying to help you create an environment for you today where you're looking at your marriage because some of these things are happening and you're going, well, my marriage is over, to hell with that. I'm not doing that at all. This is about being aware, okay? And not only do we have to be aware in the physical world, we have to be very aware in the spiritual world, because if you're a person of faith, you will understand that the closer we try to get to God, the more that the darkness tries to pull us away. And the darkness is going to pull us away with things like this, by ending relationships, by making us feel insecure in the relationship, causing us to push away, causing us to become helpless and hopeless. And when we start to feel those things, we also create distance between us and our God, which this just opens the door. We call this podcast Dancing with the Darkness. This is when we allow the darkness to lead that dance. And bad things happen because we do not have in our minds and in our hearts what we need to not only survive this, but to thrive with this. And so I want you to understand today, it's Palm Sunday if you're a person of faith. And I want you to understand, this is the day that Jesus came into town and everybody was like, yay, the Messiah, yay, we love you, okay? And then a week later, they killed him. And so I want you to understand that Jesus understands everything that you're going through right now. He understands if you're having a marriage or a relationship like this. He understands. He also understands if it's come to its ending point and it's not restorable. Maybe one or the other has done something that is irredeemable in the sight of the other. This does not mean that your life is over. It does not mean that your relationship with God is over. Okay, we have to understand that everyone is redeemable, everyone is forgivable. And so I want you to leave today, instead of being in a bad place, I want you to leave this video today with hope and understanding that no matter what you've done, no matter what's happened in your relationships, no matter what's happened to you, He loves you and He has a purpose for you. And I say this from the heart because I live it, I breathe it every single day. And if it wasn't for my God, then the darkness would win the dance with me. And that's why I do this podcast, because I want you to know that there's other people struggling, but there's other people that are thriving and overcoming, and you can do the same. If this video has spoken to you today, if it's tugged at your heart, if it's given you something, even fear, it doesn't matter. Reach out. You can reach out to us. You can reach out to someone else that you trust, whether it be a friend or a pastor or a counselor. Don't do this alone. And most of all, don't lose hope. As we go into this series, starting after this video, and we start talking about attachment, and we start talking about how that formed, what that looks like, and why it happened, then you're going to start understanding the hope that I'm trying to instill in you today. You'll start to understand why you are who you are, why you do what you do in relationships, and ways to fix it. Okay? There is hope. There is redemption. God bless everyone. Happy Palm Sunday. And we look forward to seeing you next time for our next video. Until next time, keep the faith, stay strong, and know that you're being prayed for and that you can do this.